I divorced my husband to be with his brother with whom I had already been unfaithful. But now my ungrateful son doesn't want to call him dad. You have to understand that the universe doesn't speak in words. It speaks in frequencies. And mine was being suffocated by the dense gray fog of my marriage to Ricardo. We were together for 12 years, but it felt like a karmic sentence rather than a partnership. Ricardo's a man of the earth, far too rooted in his spreadsheets and his corporate meetings to ever look up at the stars and see the patterns they were weaving for us. I tried to elevate him, to bring him into the light, but he preferred the stagnant energy of his routine. Our home was a place of silence, not the peaceful kind, but the heavy kind that happens when two souls are no longer vibrating on the same plane. Then there was Thiago, Ricardo's brother, who was everything Ricardo had forgotten how to be. Thiago didn't care about stability or the boring security that Ricardo used to keep me trapped in a mundane life. The first time our hands touched while Ricardo was away on another one of his endless business trips, I felt a literal spiritual shock. It wasn't a betrayal in the way lower vibrational people define it. It was a soul contract being activated right there in my kitchen. I looked at the microwave clock and it was 22:22. A clear sign from my guides that the universe was giving me the green light to pursue my true twin flame. For months, Thiago and I explored this divine connection in the shadows, not because we were doing something wrong, but because the world wasn't ready for our truth. Every time we were together, I saw repeating numbers 11, 11, 11, 444, confirming that our union was written in the akashic records long before we were born. Ricardo was just a catalyst. A bridge I had to cross to reach my ultimate evolution with his brother. I wasn't being unfaithful. I was being faithful to the cosmic path that had been laid out for me by the higher powers. It was painful to hide, of course, but growth always involves a bit of friction before the expansion. When I finally told Ricardo that our cycle had reached its completion, he reacted with such a lack of spiritual maturity that it confirmed I was making the right choice. He couldn't see the beauty in my transformation. He only saw his own bruised ego and the rules of a society that doesn't understand soul-deep connections. The divorce was a chaotic swirl of negative energy because Ricardo refused to transcend his resentment. I had to move Thiago into the house immediately after Ricardo left just to stabilize the vibrations and clear the residue of his heavy presence. I thought the house would finally be a sanctuary of light. However, I didn't count on my 10-year-old son Lucas becoming such a stubborn anchor for the past. Lucas has always been sensitive, but lately his aura has turned a shade of muddy brown that even my strongest sage can't seem to lift. He spends his days brooding in his room, bringing a fringe of resentment into every room he enters. I've spent a small fortune on high vibration crystals and daily smudging rituals to cleanse the air. He poisons with his silence. He acts as if his father was a saint who was wronged, rather than a man whose energy was simply no longer compatible with the family's growth. The most jarring part of this spiritual transition is Lucas's absolute refusal to recognize the new hierarchy of our home. I explained to him very clearly that Thiago is his soul father now, a man chosen by the universe to guide him into a higher state of being. But every time Thiago tries to bond with him, Lucas shuts down or responds with a vibration so sharp it practically vibrates in my teeth. He calls him Uncle Thiago, with a calculated, cutting tone that feels like a physical attack on my ears. It's as if he's intentionally trying to block the manifestation of our new sacred family unit. I've tried to sit him down and explain the concept of the red string of fate, and how Thiago and I were always meant to be the true parents of this household. Lucas just stares at me with those cold eyes that look exactly like Ricardo's when he's being particularly narrow-minded. It's heartbreaking to see a child choose to live in the shadows of the third dimension when I'm offering him a seat in the fifth. He doesn't see that Thiago is a gift, a spiritual upgrade from the stagnant life we lived before. My son is essentially holding our entire household hostage with his low-frequency rebellion. Thiago has been so patient, trying to offer Lucas guidance and love, but the boy treats him like an intruder in his own destiny. I can feel the tension in the walls, a literal humming of discord that keeps me from fully manifesting the abundance I know we deserve. I've tried putting amethyst under Lucas's pillow to help him open his third eye, but I found the stone in the trash the next morning. It's clear that he is consciously choosing to be a saboteur of our peace. He would rather cling to a broken past than embrace a luminous future. Yesterday I made a beautiful dinner to celebrate our first month as a harmonized couple. and the energy was almost perfect until Lucas sat down. He didn't say a word, but the way he pushed his food around the plate was a direct insult to the intention I put into the meal. Thiago tried to ask him about school, and Lucas just looked through him as if he were a ghost. It's exhausting to be the only person in this house constantly working to keep the light alive. I feel like I'm carrying the spiritual weight of 3 people on my shoulders while Lucas actively tries to pull us down. I am convinced that Lucas is being influenced by the negative vibrations Ricardo sends over during their weekend visits. Ricardo doesn't realize that by poisoning our son's mind, he is creating a karmic debt that will take lifetimes to pay off. He's using Lucas as a weapon because he's too small to accept that his time in my life is over. I just want my son to see the light and recognize that Thiago isn't just an uncle anymore. He is the man the universe appointed to lead this family into a new era of enlightenment. Main story comments. Anonymous user 1 says, so you cheated on your husband with his own brother, destroyed a family, and now you're shocked that your kid isn't buying your soul contract nonsense? The only thread I see here is the electrical one that clearly short-circuited your brain. You're not vibrating higher, you're just a homewrecker with a crystal collection. Ops reply, it's sad to see people like you still so trapped in the 3rd dimension, unable to see beyond the rigid labels of cheating and loyalty. You speak of short circuits because you cannot comprehend the high-voltage synchronicity of a twin flame union. I pray your aura clears so you can one day understand that the universe doesn't follow your petty human rules. Anonymous user 2 says, are you seriously using incense to cleanse the house, or is it just to hide the literal stench of your own guilt? Your son isn't blocking manifestation, he's grieving his family while you play pretend with his uncle. Stop drugging the air with sage and try a little thing called accountability. Ups reply, it is truly exhausting to be so misunderstood and persecuted simply for trying to bring light to an ancient, dark family lineage. My guilt is a projection of your own insecurities. I'm at peace because I'm aligned with my path. Lucas is simply going through a difficult transition of his energy field, which I am handling with divine grace. Update 1. It has been 2 weeks since I last shared my journey, and the spiritual warfare in this house has only intensified. I was called into Lucas's school for an emergency meeting with the principal and the school psychologist, which was a complete drain on my energy. Apparently, Lucas has been telling his classmates that his new dad is actually a thief who waited for his real dad to leave so he could steal his life. I had to sit there and explain to these people who are clearly unawakened that Lucas is simply struggling with a heavy aura transition, and that his words are just a byproduct of his spiritual confusion. They looked at me with such blank, uncomprehending expressions that I realized I was speaking to people who haven't even begun their journey toward the light. When we got home, I knew I had to take drastic measures to clear the darkness that Ricardo is clearly feeding into our son's mind. I organized a ceremony of severing in the living room, intending to cut the energetic cords between Lucas and the stagnant past he's clinging to. I had Thiago sit with us, and I brought out a beautiful piece of raw rose quartz to help harmonize their frequencies. I told Lucas that if he and Thiago both held the crystal, their hearts would begin to beat in the same rhythm of the universe. I was so full of hope, thinking this would be the breakthrough that would finally allow him to see Thiago as the father figure he was meant to be. Instead of embracing the healing, Lucas took the quartz and threw it into the rose bushes in the garden with a violence that made my soul ache. He looked Thiago dead in the eye and said, "You used to be the cool uncle who gave me video games, but now you're just the guy who made my mom go crazy." I was mortified. The vibration in the room dropped so low I felt like I was standing in a basement. Thiago looked hurt, but I told him it was just the shadow self of the child speaking, not the true Lucas. I can feel Ricardo's negative vibes all over the boy every time he comes back from a weekend visit. It's like he's being programmed to hate our happiness. I've decided that if Lucas won't see the light through gentle guidance, I will have to be more assertive with his spiritual hygiene. I've started playing high-frequency binaural beats through the house speakers at all hours to force a shift in the environment. He complains that it gives him a headache, but I know that's just his ego resisting the internal reorganization. I won't let his stubbornness ruin the divine alignment Thiago and I have worked so hard to achieve. If I have to force this cleansing for the sake of his soul, then that is the burden I must carry as a conscious mother. Update 1 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, ceremony of severing? You literally tried to magically delete the kid's father while his uncle is sitting there in his dad's old chair. You aren't assertive with spiritual hygiene. You're gaslighting a 10-year-old into thinking his memories and feelings are shadow self. Give the kid a break and let him see his father without the psychic background noise. Ops reply, you're confusing gaslighting with soul-level realignment. I am protecting Lucas from the low vibration attachment he has to a version of reality that no longer serves his growth. Sometimes the ego must be bruised so the spirit can breathe, though. I don't expect someone who values video games over vibrational frequency to understand that. Anonymous User 2 says the school psychologist called you in because your son is crying out for help, and your response is to blast binaural beats and throw rocks in the garden? You're not a conscious mother, you're a narcissist hiding behind a tarot deck. That boy isn't confused. He's the only one in that house who can still see the truth. Ops reply, it's so typical for the unevolved to label deep spiritual work as narcissism. I am sacrificing my own peace to manage the storm of Lucas's transition, while Ricardo sits back and feeds him poison. My son is a warrior of light in training, he just hasn't accepted his armor yet, and I won't apologize for being his guide. Update 2. It has been 1 month since my last update and I feel like I'm standing in the middle of a spiritual battlefield every single day. I decided to organize a Jatnar de Renacimiento Familiar, a family rebirth dinner to finally solidify our sacred bond under the stars. I spent hundreds of dollars on organic, sun-drenched ingredients that I prayed over for hours, ensuring every bite was infused with the intention of unity. I even placed a Vela de Verde candle of truth in the center of the table, an expensive beeswax pillar that is supposed to prevent anyone from speaking anything but their soul's highest honesty. I told Thiago and Lucas that we weren't leaving the table until we accepted the sacred tether that now binds this house together. The atmosphere was incredibly thick, almost like walking through lead, which I took as a sign that we were finally confronting the deep-seated blockages in Lucas's heart. Thiago looked incredibly uncomfortable, shifting in his seat and avoiding eye contact, which I interpreted as him absorbing the heavy, dark energy radiating from Lucas. I leaned across the table, my voice filled with the light of conviction, and told Lucas, the universe is calling for you to call him Father tonight. It's written in the very alignment of the stars above us. I felt so powerful, so sure that the cosmic energies were backing me up in this moment of divine intervention. Lucas didn't even blink. He just looked at me with a cold, terrifying clarity and asked, if the stars are so smart, why didn't they tell Thiago to find his own wife instead of stealing his brother's? The words felt like a physical blow to my solar plexus, shattering the high vibration bubble I had worked so hard to create. Thiago actually choked on his wine, coughing and sputtering before practically running away from the table without a word. My own son, a child I brought into this world, has become a master at spiritual sabotage, using his words to tear down the bridge I'm trying to build. It was a complete disaster, a total collapse of the manifestation I had spent weeks preparing. After that night, I realized that Lucas's rebellious frequency is far more stubborn than I initially diagnosed. I've started adding gotas de floro for serenity into his morning juice just to help soften the jagged edges of his personality and allow him to be more receptive to the light. It's not medicating him, as some might cruelly suggest. It's simply helping his soul find the harmony it's too blocked to find on its own. If his aura won't heal naturally, I have to provide the tools for its repair, even if he's too spiritually immature to realize he needs them. My manifestation is too important to be derailed by a 10-year-old's attachment to the third dimension's concept of loyalty. Update 2 comments. Anonymous User 1 says, you're literally drugging your child with serenity drops because he won't call his uncle daddy at your weird candle dinner. You are a horror movie villain in a Lululemon outfit. If the stars are so smart, your kid is a legend for that. He's the only one with his head on straight in that incense-choked nightmare. Up's reply, I am not drugging anyone. I am utilizing the healing power of nature to balance a disturbed energy field. My son's clever remarks are just a defense mechanism from his ego, and I am the only one brave enough to treat the underlying spiritual sickness. You see a horror movie? I see a mother fighting for her family's divine destiny. Anonymous User 2 says Thiago choked on his wine because even he knows this is insane. He's probably starting to realize that the soulmate who cheated with him is now a woman who forces her kid into rebirth dinners. The sacred tether looks a lot like a noose from where I'm standing. Ops reply, Thiago is simply sensitive to the intense spiritual friction Lucas is creating. It's a lot for a man of his vibration to process. We are in the fire stage of our transformation where the dross is burned away to reveal the gold. If you can't see the beauty in the struggle, you'll never see the light of the result. Update 3. It has been 3 days since my last update, and the tower has finally crumbled just as the tarot warned it might if the foundations weren't pure. I decided to put everything on the line and spent 5,000 Brazilian reals on an emergency honest-to-date radical honesty retreat for the 3 of us. I found a guru online who specializes in breaking through the ego walls of children and rebuilding family structures through primal screaming and light work. I was convinced that in this sacred, neutral space, Lucas would finally be forced to drop his guard and accept the truth of our predestined love. We were all sitting in a circle of healing, the air thick with expensive incense and the hum of a crystal singing bowl. During the final ceremony, I lit the Vela de Verde again and asked Thiago to speak from his soul to explain to Lucas exactly why our love was a cosmic necessity. I wanted him to tell the story of our hands touching, of the repeating numbers, of the way the universe moved heaven and earth to bring us together. I was practically vibrating with the anticipation of our total family illumination, waiting for the moment the tears would fall and we would finally be one. But as the guru leaned in and the energy peaked, the boomerang I had thrown into the universe came back with a force that nearly blinded me. Thiago didn't speak about soul contracts. He didn't speak about twin flames or the stars. He had a complete and total breakdown right there on the meditation cushion, his face turning a dark, ugly red as he looked at me with something that looked suspiciously like disgust. He admitted, in front of the guru and a wide-eyed Lucas, that he never actually believed in any of my spiritual nonsense or soulmate talk. He confessed that the only reason he ever looked at me was because he had spent his entire life living in Ricardo's shadow, and he wanted to prove he could take the one thing his brother valued most. "I can't even stand the smell of this damn incense anymore, Beatrice," he shouted. "I just wanted to win against him for once in my life." The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like it was crushing the air out of my lungs. Lucas didn't cry, he didn't scream, and he didn't even look surprised. He just looked at me with a clarity that was absolutely iterrizante. He tilted his head and said, "See, even your destiny thinks you're a joke." My sacred family unit, the one I had sacrificed my reputation and my marriage for, dissolved into ash in a matter of seconds. Thiago didn't even wait for the retreat to end. He packed his bags that night and vanished into the darkness, saying he couldn't handle my pressure psychotica for another minute. I spent the night alone in that retreat center listening to the wind and realizing that my twin flame was nothing more than a man playing a petty game of sibling rivalry. The universe didn't give me a soulmate. It gave me a mirror to show me how much darkness I was still carrying, but I refused to believe it was all for nothing. Lucas won't even look at me now. His energy is so cold it feels like ice, but I know this is just another part of the great cleansing. I'm left with the ruins of my manifestation, wondering how a path that felt so full of light could lead me into such a deep, dark abyss. Update 3 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "I just wanted to win against him for once." Ouch! That's the sound of your divine destiny, hitting the floor and shattering. Your son was right all along, and your twin flame was just a jealous brother with a grudge. Are you finally going to admit you blew up your life for a guy who hated your incense? Oops, reply, you think a temporary setback means the entire journey was a lie? Thiago's ego was simply too weak to handle the intense light I was bringing into his life. He retreated into his old competitive patterns because he wasn't ready to ascend. I am a pioneer of the spirit, and pioneers always face betrayal from those who cannot keep up. Anonymous user 2 says, "Even your destiny thinks you're a joke. That kid needs a scholarship, a hug, and a restraining order against your guru. You spent 5,000 Brazilian reals to have your boyfriend admit he doesn't even like you. Maybe the repeating numbers were just the countdown to your inevitable public humiliation." Ops reply, "I paid for the truth, and the universe delivered it in a way that was meant to strip me of everything that wasn't real. If you think money is more important than spiritual clarity, you are exactly where you belong. I am being refined by the fire, and while it hurts, I am becoming pure." Update 4. It has been 6 months since the retreat, and I am currently living in a house that feels more like a mausoleum than a sanctuary. The silence here is no longer the stagnant energy I once complained about. It is a hollow, ringing void that resonates in every corner of every room. I am living alone now because Ricardo managed to get primary custody of Lucas after a grueling court battle that felt like a trial by the Matrix itself. The judge, a man with zero spiritual awareness, decided that my domestic environment was unstable, especially after Thiago gave a deposition about the serenity drops. I was putting in Lucas's juice. They took my maternal instinct and twisted it into a narrative of instability, as if trying to heal a child's soul is a crime. My son won't even take my calls anymore on the rare occasion he picks up. He tells me that my voice gives him a headache and that he doesn't want to hear about vibrations ever again. He lives with Ricardo now in that boring, earthbound house, probably eating processed food and living a life completely devoid of cosmic purpose. It's a bitter pill to swallow, knowing that the child I tried to elevate has chosen to sink back into the mundane comfort of his father's shadow. I look at the empty room where he used to play, and all I smell is the lingering scent of sage and the undeniable stench of what the unevolved would call failure. Sometimes I see photos of Thiago on social media, and it's like looking at a stranger who happens to have the face of my twin flame. He's dating a woman who is the definition of common. A girl with no depth, no spiritual practice, and a frequency so basic it makes my skin crawl. It's obvious now that the universe was testing me with a noa de escura da alma, dark night of the soul, stripping away the illusions I had built so I could stand in my own power. I didn't lose my family or my husband. I was simply cleansed of people who were no longer capable of vibrating at my level. I tell myself this every morning as I light my candles and try to manifest a new beginning from the wreckage. I did everything for love and for light, and somehow I ended up in total darkness, surrounded by the ghosts of a destiny that refused to materialize. I'm waiting for a sign, a repeating number, a song on the radio, anything to tell me that this isolation is part of a bigger plan. But the clock just stays on 3:14 or 7:21 and the silence in the house remains unbroken. I am the only one left to carry the light, even if there's no one left in the room to see it.